All right. Arnold Allen versus Milkazil Costa happened this past weekend, as well as the MVP card. Let's start with Costa versus Allen. What were your impressions from that fight? Allen gets the decision win, which is what I predicted.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
I mean, I thought Costa was getting a decision. We were both right, the fact that it was going to be a decision, but we were split on that. And honestly, dude, I think Allen game planned just really well for this fight. Like, insanely well. I have never seen Allen start a fight and like borderline jog across the octagon to like meet Costa. And it was perfect because Costa, at his core, he's a pressure fighter. He likes fighters to work at his timing. And that's where he does his best work. And Allen, going into this fight, he knew that. And he was like, I'm going to push you back. Like Costa was almost on the cage the entire fight. Like, Ewing Estevam. And Costa did not get a single chance to get his timing going. It was all just conforming to Allen's timing. And there was a little bit of wrestling in the first round. Allen took him down, which I think was definitely a mistake. And it's kind of like when Hamza took Gilbert down and then Gilbert threw up like an arm bar right away. And he was like, I'm not doing that again. A similar thing kind of happened where he took Costa down, and it wasn't terrible, but Costa was kind of like playing with some guillotines and stuff like that. And they kind of didn't wrestle too much for most of the rest of the fight. A little bit maybe towards the end, but he was also, his defensive BJJ was really good. Like, he did a good job of keeping his elbows tight to his body and just stuff like that. And so, yeah, I mean, dude, honestly, just a really good performance for Allen. Game plan perfectly. I'm happy Allen won, honestly. As much as I would have preferred to have, like, in every division, I love it when new blood kind of gets a finish and gets into the top 5, top 10. That's just, like, exciting. It kind of moves the sport forward. But Allen is one of those guys where he has he's likable, but he's kind of been on a win-loss, loss. Like, that's just kind of his resume. And he's fighting dudes that are really good. And so I am happy that he's in the win column. Because remember, he lost to Mofsar, and then he beat Giga Jikadze, and then he lost to John Silva, and now he beat Costa. And so, yeah, I'm happy he's in the win column. He's a likable fighter, and it was a pretty entertaining fight.
Yeah, once again, we have the situation where you have a guy who's bounced around the top 5 for a little bit, fight somebody who's on a huge win streak, who's maybe somewhere between 10 and 15, right? It feels like we've seen this fight happen a few times this year. We talked about it in last pod. Fights like Vinicius Oliveira versus Mario Bautista, right? Or Sean Strickland versus Anthony Hernandez, these kinds of fights. And once again, the more experienced fighter won. I think this fight looked pretty much exactly like we thought it was going to. Allen is very, very well-rounded. He's not spectacular at any one thing, but he also doesn't have any holes in his game. Melquizo Costa is primarily a kicker, and I made a mistake in the last pod. I said that Allen was primarily orthodox. That's wrong. He's actually a southpaw. I don't know where I got that from. Maybe I just kind of had things turned around a little bit. But anyways, this fight was southpaw versus southpaw. And that changes things a lot because basically Costa's body kicks and head kicks kind of weren't really a thing in this fight. Because if it's southpaw versus southpaw, those body kicks hit Allen's lead side versus like the face of his ribs, like it would be if they were in an open stance. And that's problematic for a lot of reasons. Like, first of all, the kick is hitting his back, which just doesn't really do the same kind of damage that it would if it was hitting you right in the liver. But the other problem is that it's way easier to catch because if he's here, right, and the kick hits right here, it's not that hard for him to just reach down and grab it, right? And he did that multiple times, probably like at least 3 or 4 times he caught one of those kicks, and Costa just wasn't really throwing them that much after that. Adesanya did that really well against Paulo Costa because they were in a close stance as well. Adesanya can fight out of both stances, but obviously Costa, he's primarily, well, I don't want to say primarily a kicker, but his body kick is a huge part of his game. Like, that's basically how he beat Roman Kopylov. But when he fought Adesanya, he was kicking Adesanya's lead side. And so there was multiple times where Adesanya would just catch the kick, or it's a lot easier to dodge it, right? Because you can just kind of lean out and it'll kind of hit the whole face of your body, right? Same thing kind of happened with Arnold Allen a few times in this fight. And so Costa pretty much had to rely entirely on low kicks, which were super effective. Like, I don't really feel like Allen was defending them that much. He didn't really check a lot of them. He would lift his leg up a little bit. Like, he came into this fight very much in like a very Muay Thai style kind of stance. Hands held really high, lead leg super light. And then he kind of switched back and forth between like, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth in my stance a little more like karate style. But he came into the fight very much like a Thai style stance. He would pick his lead leg up quite a bit if the low kicks were coming, which I guess takes a little bit of the impact off. But for the most part, he didn't really defend them, which I was surprised because Costa landed a lot. He landed probably like 20 to 30 of those low kicks, and Arnold didn't seem to be phased at all, which was very interesting. What other things did I like? I liked when Arnold Allen would catch the kick, and then as he let go, hit the body kick, right? Like he would catch Costa's kick. Costa would be a little bit immobilized and hopping on one leg, and then the moment he lets it go, and Costa's stuck in range on one leg, like probably not going to counter him, ripped a body kick. He did that maybe just once, but it was awesome. Sometimes Costa would do one of those like little pendulum kicks. So instead of kicking with his back leg, he would bring his back leg up, kick with the front leg, right? And try and kick the face of Arnold Allen's body. It's kind of like a switch kick, but a little bit faster. And Arnold Allen, because his lead leg, he was constantly picking it up, he would check the kick across, like, so with his lead leg, he would check the kick. Worked really good. What else was there? So I think the biggest piece that made Allen win this fight, and this is kind of what we said in the pre-fight breakdown as well, was neither of these guys are like, I don't know if I fully agree that Costa is a pressure fighter, because when I rewatched his last 6 fights, a lot of the time he was on the outside. Like he was not controlling the center. He's not the same kind of pressure fighter that like Pereira or something or Adesanya are. Like they're just different. Or not Adesanya. What am I thinking of? Oliveira. They're just kind of different. And I was like, if Allen is defensively sound, like he doesn't let his guard down completely, and he just puts on a little bit more pressure than Costa, he'll probably squeak out a decision. And he did. His wrestling looked great. I love that Kasotogake hit at the beginning. It's basically like an outside trip in the first round. That was awesome. What was I going to say? Yeah, and I think the biggest deciding factor as well, beyond just like the pressure, was the speed. Allen's left cross was absolutely money in this fight. He didn't throw a lot of crazy combinations. It was mostly just like 1-2s, but his left, like it just seemed like Costa couldn't get out of the way of Allen's left cross. And honestly, the same thing for Costa too. Like that was his best weapon besides the low kicks. Is he would throw like a combination that was almost like a Wonder Boy style blitz, where he would throw like 4 punches in a row, just kind of like in sequence. And usually it was like the 3rd or 4th punch, the left hand that would land over the top and kind of hit Arnold on the top of the head. Those are pretty good too, but for the most part, Arnold was landing, like if there was one big shot each round, Arnold Allen was the one that was landing it. So I agree with the judge's decision on this one. I think Allen deserved the decision pretty confidently. And yeah, what's next for him? I feel like he should either fight Yair, who's ranked number 5. Don't know where that guy is. I feel like we've been saying that for months now. But he should fight Yair. He deserves someone ranked above him. Or if Diego Lopez loses to, who's he fighting? Steve Garcia. If Diego Lopez loses to Steve Garcia, he should fight Diego Lopez. But generally, he should fight somebody higher than him. Movsar is going to fight for the belt. Lerone Murphy should probably fight Aljamain Sterling, because Aljamain Sterling is also coming off of a win, which leaves Yair and Jean Silva. He just fought Jean Silva. That doesn't make any sense. Plus, Jean Silva hasn't fought since then, too, so he probably deserves somebody higher ranked. I think Jean Silva and Arnold Allen should fight Yair and the loser of, if Diego Lopez loses to Steve Garcia, those people should fight. Like maybe Jean Silva could rematch Diego Lopez. Realistically, Jean Silva should probably fight Yair, and Arnold Allen should probably fight Diego Lopez if he loses to Steve Garcia. That's my take, anyways. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't. It's kind of hard to disagree on that. There's also Lerone Murphy in there. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it was just honestly a big combination of maybe Melky just didn't, the fact that he was fighting a southpaw. I thought he was switch stance. I thought he was comfortable in both stances. I didn't know he was like very much a southpaw and didn't really want to switch. But dude, Arnold is he's just so good at game planning for every fighter he faces. Like even against Jean Silva, he wasn't like completely out of the water. I'm pretty sure it was like a 29-28, you know, and there were some close rounds against Mofsar. Same thing. There were close rounds. He may have taken a round off Max Holloway. It's like Arnold is he's one of those guys where he doesn't have like an aspect to his game that I'm like, he's just better than everybody else at, but he can consistently make any fight competitive. Just by being like well-rounded. I love that about him. Dude, like, I'm not going to say that I watch a lot of Muay Thai, but the dude, he looked like he had a camp in Thailand. He looked like, you know, Jonathan Haggerty, because I know that guy's English and a Muay Thai fighter. You know, it was like the Sean Strickland where you raise your knee, you're marching to stop the calf kicks. But like he did that, but he also was like a little bit more dynamic and was more entertaining than Sean Strickland, you know? And so maybe Sean Strickland should take some notes off the old almighty Allen. But anyways,
yeah. One more thing I was going to say. I think Melchizedek Costa, if he put on more pressure, it would have been good for him. Because I feel like we saw that in round 5. In round 5, he was really putting the pressure on, and it worked. Like, Allen was a little flustered by it until he got the takedown. And so, yeah, I feel like that should have happened in like round 2 or 3. He should have realized, wait a second, I'm going to lose this fight if I don't put more pressure on and make it a little more chaotic. But he just waited too long to make that decision. So it was a winnable fight for Melchizedek Costa. Like I'm not going to say, like if they fight 10 times, Allen is not winning all 10. But I think he was a little bit more composed. He was put on a little bit more pressure, and the speed difference, like he leaned into that and he used that to his advantage, and he got the win. Very good win.
Yeah. Okay, so we can probably move on to Santos versus Choi, the co-main. And we don't have to talk about this for a while, but all I can say is when I was taking notes in this fight, I was glazing Santos, and then he got knocked out to a body shot, and I was like, oh, okay. But dude, in that first round, Santos was so fast. He honestly, this fight kind of reminded me of like Jean Silva versus Diego Lopez. The first round, Santos was just putting a beating on Choi. Just super well-rounded variety of attacks. You know, the kicks, the spinning back kicks, the body kicks, the like just variety of different types of punching. He was throwing everything really hard. And when somebody does that, you're always worried about the gas. And then, you know, Santos just kind of weathered the storm and got the TKO in the second round. It's one of those fights where it might be controversial to say, but I feel like Santos is the better fighter, but Choi was just born with a granite chin. And I don't know if that's controversial to say, but it's just like, I don't know, but long story short, it was a fun fight, entertaining fight. It's really sad because Choi he's actually kind of old. I don't know if you knew this, but I think he's like...
He's 35.
Yeah, 35, and he's kind of like a prospect, but it's kind of funny. But I don't really have more like analysis to say, but it was a fun fight. What can I say?
Yeah, Dooho Choi is coming off of 3 KO wins in a row, which is pretty dang good. So I don't know. I don't know if I fully agree with you that Santos was like absolutely putting on a beatdown style performance against him in round 1. A lot of the stuff that he threw was being kind of blocked or partially blocked. Like I think Dooho Choi's head movement was actually pretty good. He kept his hands high for the most part. Like there was not a lot that landed flush against him. And I think Dooho Choi, his jab was very good. He also had a nice lead hook. There was a moment in the first round where Santos was trying to tee off on him, and Choi landed this massive. I want to say it was a left hook. It may have been a right hook, but it was a left hook, some kind of overhand type thing in the middle when he was up against the fence that made Santos wobbly, and he had to start wrestling. Like little things like that kind of fly under the radar. That I wouldn't consider that to be like I would not have made that a 10-8 round. I think that was a 10-9 round for Santos, but I don't think it was a 10-8. And then ripped him with a body shot in round 2. I think Santos was just throwing a little too hard. DC said it in kind of a funny way. He was like, he's like flying out of his shoes every time he throws a punch. It felt a little bit like that. He wasn't nearly as composed. Choi was a lot more composed. I do think Santos is talented though. Like that kind of pressure would really affect a lot of fighters. Obviously he's coming off of a pretty substantial win streak. But yeah, I don't really know if I have much else to say about that one. It was a really fun fight, though. I mean, pretty short-lived, but a lot of action. And yeah, I was impressed with Doo-Ho Choi.
Yeah, I do like how Santos was throwing in very large combinations. I wish he would have like not did that much, like threw as hard. But I did like that because that's kind of what Ilya has talked about constantly. He's like, dude, the long combinations is like a forgotten talent that most of my knockouts stem from. It's like you don't just throw 1-2s. It's like MMA. It's like you just throw 1-2s and 1-2-3s. You got to throw 5+ punch combinations, and yeah, you might not land the first 4, but you're gonna land the last 2. You know what I mean? And I think Santos did that pretty well. I don't think it was a 10-8, but more just I was just looking at Choi's body language, and I just thought he looked very just flustered, and that the accumulation of strikes. There wasn't a moment where he got hit by something and he was like straight up just cooked, but I don't know. It looked like his body was wearing some damage, and I thought he looked a little bit like kind of on shaky legs, just kind of just weathering the storm. But yeah, but we can move on to Diaz and Wellmaker. And in this fight, dude, the only thing I can say for Wellmaker, yeah, he just didn't really have a lot of confidence in this fight. Huge upset. I mean, bravo to Juan Diaz. That was a crazy good win to have in his resume.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that guy can now feed his family for another 6 months off that win. It's like the classic unranked fighter, It's like they're fighting to pay off their mortgage. But dude, if anything for Wellmaker that I just have my thoughts, he needs like Trevor Whitman in his corner saying, dude, take 10% off your shots. It's like Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson when they fought. Tony in the first 2 rounds, like I think it was like 1-1 going to the third round. And, the second round, obviously, pretty historically, they both threw really hard uppercuts. Tony's landed, Justin didn't, and Justin got dropped pretty bad at the end of the second round. And Trevor Whitman sat him down. He was like, bro, stop throwing like you're trying to kill him. All right, this is a 5-round fight. You need to settle down. And he said, take 10% off your shots and you're going to hit the mark. And I know this wasn't a 5-round fight for Wellmaker, but I'm like, dude, you're like trying to get knockouts all the time, and not everybody's gonna have Chris Mutino levels of head movement. You have to be able to take 10% off your shots and focus on timing rather than power. And I think he takes too much time in between throwing. He's like, I throw really hard and then I just like kind of just flow for like, a minute, and then I throw really hard. I'm like, bro, relax, take 10% off your shots, a little bit more volume, and focus on just actually timing your punches right and not just trying to kill him every time, and that's just kind of like my conceptual analysis of this fight. Obviously, Wellmaker got really tired in this fight because of the grappling. That was the first time he'd really, really grappled. Ewing kind of grappled him a little bit by taking him down with a judo throw, but all things considered, this is his first time grappling in the cage, and you can tell that really just cooked his cardio. And yeah, I don't know if you have anything you want to say.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of stuff on the feet. I just literally just rewatched this fight like a few minutes ago, and I don't really feel like I had a lot of takeaways from the stand-up. Maybe I was just more focused on the grappling, but I think Juan Diaz had a good game plan to take a grappling approach. The finishing sequence was very good. Like, this happened multiple times in this fight where this is one of the things that I don't really have a lot of experience with, but like wall wrestling is a very interesting thing because when you can lean up against the wall, it kind of changes like the way that you would take somebody down, right? Like Wellmaker, he would lean over a lot, but also he would like scoot his hips back really far. So all of his weight was kind of on his heels. And Diaz just kind of dragged him backward a few times and it brought him down. Kind of very similar to like Hamzat does that a lot. He did that against DDP, did that against Gilbert Burns. I think he even did that against Usman as well. Because a lot of times what people do when they're up against the fence, they really stagger their stance. They kind of dig their heels into the ground and then they try and push down. Because usually when you're up against the fence, you're dealing with a body lock, right? They push down on the hands to try and break them to build up like a lot of tension. And so Diaz would just kind of drag him backward and just brought him down really easily. And then Diaz was really aggressive about attacking the back. And basically, Wellmaker was doing some hand fighting. And Diaz, when he threw his hook in, he threw it really high up, which I like because it kind of rode over his shoulder and slid down and slid right between the arm and the back. And so he had Wellmaker's arm pinned in his, it wasn't a body triangle, but he had it pinned basically like between, like under one of his hooks. And so eventually Wellmaker got it out. Actually, was it a body triangle? I don't think it was a body triangle, but I think he had his feet locked. Eventually Wellmaker got it out, but by the time he had done that, Diaz's choking arm was already at the shoulder. And when you're defending chokes, you really want to keep the hand like close to your chest as much as possible. So if someone's trying to choke me with this arm, like I'm really trying to like keep it here to the very best of my ability. Once it starts to creep up this way, you're kind of in trouble. Like if the hand is on the shoulder, yeah, it's not impossible to strip it down, but your leverage is significantly worse, like way worse. And so basically Wellmaker's hand was trapped just long enough for Diaz to get his choking arm up to his shoulder. And at that point, Wellmaker's trying to reach back and to grab the other hand, but it doesn't take much for Diaz to just do a little bit of hand fighting, strip the hand away, pull his other hand back and sink it in. And at that point, it was over. Yeah, really good win. How big of an underdog was he? Wasn't Wellmaker like a minus 300 or something?
Yeah,
or
Juan Diaz
like
is
that?
probably like a +3 to +400, I'd imagine. You know, honestly, I think we need to make a no bet rule when it comes to debut fighters fighting somebody who is like a huge favorite but has like highlights over like low level opponents. That's just like a very obvious like no bet rule because we have no idea what Juan Diaz can do, just like a couple regional performances. And then this guy is a favorite because he's knocked out Chris Matino and Cameron Simon. You know, it's just like, okay. Dude, when Juan Diaz took Wellmaker down for the first time and he kind of like smelled blood in the water a little bit, dude, it felt like in Rocky IV when Rocky cut Ivan Drago and he got sat down by Apollo Creed and he's like, this guy, he's not a machine, he's a man, right? He's just a man. Mm-hmm. And it's like I feel like when somebody has so many knockout highlights on their record and you take them down and all their highlights just go out the window, it's like, okay, now we're like defending chokes and stuff. It's just kind of like I just know there was that Juan Diaz, he was just like breathe and he was like, I got him down. I'm gonna wear him out, like the fight is mine kind of thing, you know. I'm sure that was just such a good adrenaline drop for him, but yeah. You have anything else?
Yeah. Do you think I don't know if this is even like worth bringing into the conversation at this point, but do you think Malcolm Wellmaker got fraud checked a little bit by Ethan Ewing? I feel like at the time it was like, okay, he fights this guy coming basically off the construction lot who was not preparing for a fight at all and gets completely rolled. And then Ethan Ewing has his next fight against, was it Rafael Estevam? Mm-hmm. And he looks just as good. And we're like, okay, so maybe Wellmaker wasn't fraud checked. Like maybe Ethan Ewing is just genuinely a great fighter. Okay. But now he fights Juan Diaz and gets submitted. And it's like, this guy has been a -1,000 favorite, -500. I mean, when odds look like that, it kind of feels like we're looking at the next big thing, like we're looking at the next Sean O'Malley, the next Hamzat, because those guys all had odds like that when they were on their way up. And then he loses 2 fights in a row. Was he fraud checked a little bit? I think at the very least we can say that Malcolm Wellmaker, the odds have kind of corrected themselves a little bit. Like he was way blown out of proportion in his last 2 fights. Mm-hmm. He's not nearly as good as we thought he was in that sense. Like he's not as competitive. Or is it just that Ethan Ewing and Juan Diaz are really good fighters who are going to be, top 5 within the next couple of years? We see that too sometimes, where like there are genuinely good fighters who struggle a little bit. They go on some losing. They lose a few fights because their divisions are just really competitive. I mean, think about Petr Yan in the last 5 years. I know it's weird to compare Malcolm Wellmaker to Petr Yan, but Petr Yan, he's a champion. He's an incredible fighter. Still lost a few fights in the last couple of years, right? He lost to Aljamain Sterling in their rematch. Lost to Petr Yan. Lost to Sean O'Malley, and then loses to Merab. And he made a comeback, but ultimately, it happens. I mean, think about Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg, I think, is a solid fighter, but he still has struggled a little bit, Mm-hmm. So I don't really know if I want to say that Malcolm Wellmaker was fraud checked. Like, is he a fraud? I don't think so. But he's not as good as, I don't think he's going to be quite as dominant as maybe the odds made it seem like he was going to be. He's not the next Hamzat at bantamweight or O'Malley or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's more the fact also that he just, in the Ewing fight, he got absolutely mauled on the feet, which is supposed to be his playground. And then in this fight, he got mauled on the ground. So it's like, okay, you just got beat very dominantly by 2 very differently stylistic matchups. And if it was like he had a hole in his game and he keeps getting grappled up, that's one thing. But the fact that he got beat by a striker and then got beat by a grappler, it's like, okay. And then your wins on your record to kind of counteract those losses to see if you're a good fighter or good or whatever are knockout wins in your Dana White Contender Series, which doesn't really count as Dana White Contender Series. And then a knockout over Cameron Simon, who is on a 3-fight loss streak, and Chris Mutino, who I don't even know if he has a win. So it's like, okay, I don't know if you were fraud checked, but did you ever achieve anything to be fraud checked for? You know what I mean? Like you have to achieve something to get fraud checked. I honestly think that Malcolm Wellmaker may have had some just hype that was never meant to be there. And yeah, I don't even know if that answers your question, but I don't really know how I feel about Malcolm Wellmaker. I might put him on a no bet list for a while, but I hope he wins his next fight. I mean, I don't know.
No, I think we need to see Malcolm Wellmaker. We need to see a few more fights before we really know what he's all about. I think it's too up and down. Like he had some great wins, but it's like, okay, maybe those were just cans, and that's why he won those fights because he just lost 2 in a row. But maybe he's not as bad as we think he is too. It's just that Juan Diaz and Ethan Ewing are just great fighters. So yeah, I agree. I think we probably just need to see a little bit more before we can comment on whether the odds are accurately representing his abilities.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. I want to move on to the MVP card. And we'll start off with Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano. Dude, it felt like 2 women in their mid-40s just robbed Netflix, if I'm being quite honest. Like, what was that performance? Like, Gina Carano threw a leg kick, and then instantly Ronda Rousey just gets in the mount and, gets an arm bar.
Arm bars her in, 10 seconds.
Yeah, and then Ronda's kind of she's did her whole spiel of, greatest card of all time. Ball. I'm like, bro, all these fights were fixed. Literally. This... it actually, dude, Ronda Rousey is such a frustrating human. I just I am greatness. I'm like, dude, relax. You're fighting. Gina hasn't fought in almost 2 decades. 2 decades. That's older than me. The last time she fought, I was in my dad's balls. Okay. I'm serious, bro. What? What the heck are we talking about? You're not like that. And these fights were so fixed. And like every fight, you know, and how I know they were like fixed like that. And like I follow some dudes that are into like MMA betting and stuff. And the MVP card, almost every bettor like had 5 out of 6 fights were like spot on. Like round 1 submission for this guy, round 1 KO for this guy. And they were almost up the list. Round to type of win and, you know, winner. Like everything was spot on. I'm like, bro, if that is not a fixed fight that every bettor knows the exact freaking bet to do, that it's fixed, then I don't know what is. And the fact that Ronda's like, you know, the UFC needs to start worrying about MVP, you know, as like as an MMA organization that can compete with the UFC. And I think after watching this card, I'm like, I don't think you have to worry about that. Yeah, it was a good show. You know, they had like the 45-minute boxing walkouts that they did for MMA, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like Nate Diaz and Mike Perry, like it's just not going to compete. You know, I honestly, if there was any card of the year that MVP could compete with the UFC for, it would have been this week. And I almost think that Allen versus Costa, like, was like low key close with competing with this card. And this was like their best card, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Allen Costa was like one of the worst cards of the year on paper. And I think it competed pretty well, but that was kind of a mind dump of this main event. But what did you think about this main event and just kind of MVP in general?
Yeah, so I don't think MVP is a threat to the UFC at all. And the reason why I say that is that they're playing completely different games. The reason why you watch an MVP card is different from the reason why you watch the UFC. The MVP card, I don't think it was like I don't like saying that it was fixed because it wasn't fixed. However, the fights went exactly as they wanted them to go. Right? People went to see this MVP card because they said, "Oh my gosh, I remember how fun it was to watch Ronda Rousey." Because guess what? That's actually not that abnormal. Right? She, if you look at her UFC record, almost all of her fights ended within the first minute of round 1. Like she had her fight against Kat Zingano in the UFC, round 1, 14-second submission. Literally the exact same as the Gina Carano fight. Instantly goes in, gets close, throws her like either like in this fight, it was just a double leg, but in other fights, it's been like some kind of throw and gets to mount, attacks the armbar, gets the win, right? That's the vintage Ronda Rousey that had so much hype, and the MVP card wanted to recreate that. They did it. People got their money's worth. Francis Ngannou, he's a heavy hitter. He hits people, they go down. That's what people wanted to see with the MVP card. They got it. So in that way, it was not fixed. But at the same time, it kind of was fixed because they put these people against people who had no chance against them. Are we really pretending like Gina Carano was going to be a competitive fight for Ronda Rousey? Gina Carano hasn't fought since 2009. She's 44. Ronda Rousey's only 39. I mean, I know it doesn't seem like that big, but a 5-year age gap at that point is kind of a lot. And I mean, it's crazy that Ronda Rousey retired from MMA when she was 29. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, good on her because she went to the WWE where she could make a ton of money and, you know, use her popularity from the UFC to leverage that. But the UFC is playing a completely different game. The UFC is in it for the long haul. They're like, we want to build up a roster of fighters who are all really competitive and really good and pair them up against each other. So instead of the appeal for the fight, like the reason people watch it, it's not like a gimmick, right? If Francis Ngannou didn't have a history of knocking people out in the UFC, nobody would care about his fight with Felipe Lins. Nobody would care about that fight. The only reason why this MVP card had any promotional value is because the UFC spent years building up these people as like household names, right? The only reason why Francis Ngannou is a household name is because he fought competitive fights in the UFC when he was in his prime. And so now basically MVP comes in after Francis Ngannou's contract is expired with the UFC, and they say, oh, wow, Francis Ngannou became a household name because he fought all these guys, these really talented guys in the UFC. Let's pair him up against a dump truck driver and have him score a knockout and a bunch of people will watch. The problem is if MVP is relying on the UFC for household names to put out there against a bunch of random like nobodies to get easy wins and just like satisfy the fans, there's only so much that they can do. There's only so much of that they can do before they have to start building up their own household names, and that's not going to happen with the model that they have for their fights. It's kind of like how eventually Jake Paul is going to run out of retired UFC fighters and retired boxers to fight before it's like, okay, who are you fighting at this point? Because, dude, I just looked at this just for kicks, because Jake Paul has the same kind of problem that MVP has, and go figure, because it's his promotion, right? This is kind of the way he does it. He kind of wants to put on these like exhibition super fights, but they're all gimmicks, right? There's no substance to them. It's not like these guys became household names because they had a bunch of wins stacked together against high level opponents. No. He is taking retired fighters from the most popular and competitive MMA organization and pairing them up against each other. Okay, you're not doing the legwork for the promotion of this fight. The UFC did the legwork for the promotion of this card 20 years ago. And they can't rely on that, right? Jake Paul fights Ben Askren. Okay, first time he fights a real fighter, but it's Ben Askren, he's a wrestler. Oh, now he fights Tyron Woodley. He just kind of like scraping off the older retired people who are like barely like winnable fights for him, but kind of still feel like he's fighting somebody good. Anderson Silva, he's like 45. Nate Diaz. Okay, then he fights Andre August, Ryan Borland. Who are these people? Nobody watches them, right? Because Jake Paul, the only reason why people care about the Jake Paul fights is when he's fighting somebody who feels like they have, they're in some way competitive, right? I feel like what's going to happen, there are only so many of these kind of like gimmick fights they can put together with MVP before they have to be like, we have to start building up our own athletes. We have to start building up a roster of competitive fights and make household names for ourselves. And I just don't see that being the model for their organization, right? The UFC is very strict about that. Like rankings matter in the UFC. There are divisions. That's why they have the whole undisputed champion thing, because everybody is pitted against everybody in each division. And because of that, we are constantly getting fed competitive fights. The champion is always fighting the next best guy in the world, always. And because of that, you have guys like Ilia Topuria, who has just knocked out 3 of the best fighters in the world, and he's a superstar because of it. Every fight he has from now on, no matter who it is, if it's the next best guy in the world, everyone's going to sit down and watch. No gimmicks. It's just pure talent and competition. And yeah, that's why I feel like this MVP thing is, yeah, every now and then there's going to be some fun super fights. It's kind of like Jake Paul. Of course you're going to watch when Jake Paul fights Mike Tyson. What a crazy concept for a fight. But you can only do that fight one time. And there's only so many old retired Mike Tysons out there to fluff up these, like, it's basically like the WWE a little bit. It's kind of like these silly little gimmicks. And there's only so many people out there. There's only so many of those fights you can make, right? He's working with a limited supply here. He needs to start making his own superstars if he wants to really make this a thing. And maybe this is just a quick cash grab and he's going to be in and out. And smart, honestly. I mean, Jake Paul is 29 and incredibly successful. You can't deny that he is a very good promoter, but he's not playing the long game with this strategy, because who is Ronda Rousey going to fight next? I mean, seriously, what other female fighter is Ronda Rousey going to fight? Maybe have her rematch, like, I think if the price was right, Amanda Nunes would probably rematch her or something.
Chris Cyborg kind of thing.
Or Chris Cyborg. Okay, there's 2 more fights, but what after that? Who are you going to snag after that? I think people, the whole I'm going to just like take retired UFC fighters and pretend that they have any promotional value is only going to last so long. Like Francis Ngannou is great for that. He looks the part, he acts the part, but eventually people are going to go, okay, I don't really care to see Francis Ngannou knock out a light heavyweight. It just looks silly. Like that's what that fight looked like. It looked like he was fighting a light heavyweight, somebody in a completely different division. And it was just kind of dumb. I mean, yeah, good win for Ronda Rousey. She still looked really like she looked like she always did 10 years ago, like she never left. Obviously she's been staying active. She hasn't been fighting, but at least she's been staying active with like WWE stuff, which, she's in shape. But okay, maybe she rematches Holly Holm because that kind of seems on theme. Holly Holm is like 45, but eventually these fights are going to run out, right? There's only so many Amanda Nunez's and Holly Holmes out there. Okay, 2 more fights. What are you going to do next? You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's my take, anyways, on the whole of the MVP card.
Yeah, that's really well said, dude. That was made a good case. And then I know you didn't watch the Nate Diaz and Mike Perry fight, but I can kind of clue you in. It was very much, you can probably imagine how it went, but I mean, Nate Diaz just took an insane amount of damage very quickly. His face was like pretty red. Nate Diaz actually threw Mike Perry with a throw. Threw the throw, like a judo throw, which you should actually watch that back. It was actually really impressive. But the problem with judo is that it's really hard to control your weight and your opponent's weight when you hit the deck. And he threw Mike Perry, and Mike Perry kind of like scrambled up on top, and then Nate Diaz was on his back. They were there for a little bit, like a little bit of a leg entanglement. It was kind of scary actually, but Mike Perry got up, and then the next 2 rounds was just a beat down on the feet. And honestly, it's one of those things where it's like, why? And I'm not like hating on Nate Diaz. I'm not hating on him. I'm just genuinely curious. Why does he have fans? Like, what do his fans like about him as a fighter? Because I watched his fights, and like I'm assuming it's like the West Coast gangster. I don't give an F, like that kind of mentality. And I'm like, there's so many other fighters that have that. You know what I mean? That just like I don't give an F mentality. Like like a lot of fighters do. So why is Nate Diaz, who is kind of like known for just losing fights, but like being bloody at the end of them, you know? And I'm just like why is this guy pull numbers, you know? But
Yeah.
I mean, I can give him props. This is kind of a side note, but him almost knocking out Leon Edwards is probably one of the greatest moments in MMA history, honestly. In like,
that was awesome.
He's like old. Leon is like top 3 up and coming, gets beat up the entire fight. Last minute, almost knocks Leon out, and Leon's on shaky legs. I remember that was one of the craziest moments in MMA history. But besides that, I'm just like, I don't really know what makes Nate Diaz different and special that he would pull, you know, he'd get $1 million for a fight. I'm like, I don't understand. But fight was round 2, doctor stoppage. It's like half of Nate Diaz's fights are doctor stoppages, but it was okay. Fight was okay.
Yeah, I think I can comment on that. So I think it's a couple of reasons. Number one, early in Nate Diaz's career, he was getting a lot of finishes, right? So got to hand it to him there. The other thing I think is that I think there's a part of the MMA fan base that kind of almost has like a nostalgia or kind of glory days for when fighting was a little bit less like maybe technical, and these are athletes with super fancy gear and equipment, and like they wear fancy clothes and drive fancy cars. And it was more like, this is like just like your guy from down the street who's just like tough as nails and like is missing some teeth and like goes in there and fights. And like there's a little bit of like a kind of charm to that I think people kind of miss. And Nate Diaz kind of embodies that. Like, I'm Rocky Balboa, you know, I go to my local little like pizza joint, like that's where that's my dieting for the fight, and then I go in there and smoke a cigarette, stamp it out, and then go in there and fight, like that kind of thing. Like, people kind of have a soft spot for that, at least a certain generation, and they don't really care as much for like I have this, I'm going into my oxygen barrow chamber to recover in my cryo whatever and my red light therapy, and I have, I use AI to analyze my opponent's stats in their game. Like, they don't like that as much. They kind of miss when fighting was more like you were a fighter. Yeah. You weren't an MMA athlete. You were a fighter. They kind of miss that a little bit, and Nate Diaz kind of embodies that, even though he kind of sucks. And also, I think, so that's 2 reasons, right? He started out getting a lot of finishes early in his career. He was a really young guy, and he kind of had like the I'm a gangster vibe. He also embodies that fighter more than I'm an MMA athlete. No, I'm a fighter. And the last thing I think is the McGregor fight. I think the McGregor fight was just so insane. Like when he submitted Conor McGregor the first time, that to this day he is still riding the wave, like popularity wise. Like he gained so many fans probably when he beat Conor McGregor, because it was kind of like we're like American West Coast gangster and we beat the Irish guy after all the trash talk. And like he flexes his muscles in front of the camera with the blood. Like to this day, the fans are still riding that wave to that, even though Nate Diaz has had a horrible record since then. And he's just like not even good anymore. Like he still has fans because of that. So I think it's some combination of all those factors. I agree with you. The only thing that I like about watching MMA is I like watching good fighters fight other good fighters. I do not care if
and see good finishes.
Yeah. Well, literally, it's like I want to see a good fighter who gets finishes fight another good fighter who gets finishes. Charles Oliveira is fighting Ilia Topuria. My butt is in the seat. Nate Diaz is fighting Mike Perry. I could not care less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude, it's kind of like that generation of the UFC where it was like everybody was wearing those shirts that said like tap out, rock and roll, when UFC had that theme, that rock theme, like
heavy metal.
Yeah, it's like burn, you know, it had that one little theme.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, when did they do the whole like rebrand of like we just like they stopped doing rock and roll, no fighters were tap out anymore? When did that rebrand happen? You don't have to have an answer. I'm kind of confused when that whole generation switched over, but cool. So, and then the last thing we're gonna do for this pod is then obviously the Conor versus Holloway 2 card got announced top to bottom. I don't think they didn't state where the card was gonna be held, but all the fights were announced, and I figured we'd give our first thoughts, and the odds came out for Conor Holloway and BSD Paddy Pimblett. And I figured we get our first thoughts. So starting with Conor Holloway 2, I guess I can go. And I mean, it's one of those things where I have to say Holloway should get this done pretty easily. And I just don't know. Obviously I can't trust Conor to do literally anything. And Holloway has been active and he's very good, very good. And people were like, yeah, well, Conor beat Holloway. And it's like that was when he was active and he was like 25, you know? It's been a long time since then. Although this fight is at 170, which does throw this for a loop because Holloway will be very fluffy at 170 and Conor might be actually kind of peeled at 170. And so Conor will be bigger than Holloway, but that's the only thing I can really give him. But he hasn't fought in like three years, you know? So I mean, I think Holloway, I'm probably like 75-25 in favor of Holloway for this fight. But what are your first thoughts?
Yeah. So for this whole card, honestly, I kind of want to just go top to bottom and give like very brief impressions. And then we can do a more in-depth breakdown in like a month or two when this fight's actually happening. Like I don't want to do the whole thing. I don't know that's what your plan was, but I'm just going to go through. So McGregor Holloway. This fight is going to be impossible to predict because we just don't know how Conor McGregor looks like. We have very good data on Max Holloway in 2026, very bad data on Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor from 5 or 6 years ago, I'd probably pick him to win. Nowadays, it's impossible to know. I agree with you that Max Holloway is he's not a welterweight, and that actually will be a factor in this fight. Conor McGregor has a longer reach than Max Holloway. They're probably close-ish to the same height. Like I bet Max is probably slightly taller, but not by much. So I think physically McGregor will be like, he's a true 170. He'll probably be a little bigger than Max. Also, but the thing is like Max has been more active lately. So it kind of depends on how hard Conor trains for this fight. And I don't really know where he's at with that. If Conor McGregor brings in really hard sparring partners and who are constantly putting him in bad positions and he trains his cardio like nothing else, he actually might be kind of dangerous in this fight. I think McGregor is really talented. That said, I just based on pure experience alone, Max Holloway being like a minus 500 favorite makes a ton of sense. That being said, I would not pick anything for this fight or predict anything for this fight because it's just so hard to know because Max is going to be undersized. Okay. That's my thoughts on that one generally. BST versus Pimblett. Pimblett is an underdog, which I think is ridiculous. Like actually ridiculous because Benoit Saint-Denis, his striking isn't anything to write home about. And Paddy Pimblett can take a freaking punch. I mean, we saw him fight Justin Gaethje, and he ate everything that Gaethje threw at him. BSD, he's not that fast. He's not that quick. His takedowns are very, very sloppy a lot of the times. Like, he's very easy to, like, he sticks his neck out to the point that Dan Hooker had him in deep water multiple times. And you don't tell me Paddy's not going to be able to snatch his neck up? If this fight stays on the feet, it'll be a lot more competitive than people think it is. I think it will. Okay? There were a few times that Paddy had Justin Gaethje a little bit hurt in their fight. Okay? I genuinely think BSD is really overrated. I don't think he's a bad fighter, but I think that the areas that he struggled in against someone like Dan Hooker, he's really going to struggle in against Paddy. So the fact that Paddy is an underdog is crazy to me. I think he should be a favorite. I think the odds should basically be flipped. Right now, BSC is like a minus, at least yesterday when they announced that he was like a minus 170, Paddy was like plus 150. You should swap those. Paddy should be minus 170, BSC plus 150. Sandhagen versus Batista, great matchmaking. Like, this is exactly the fight that they should have done. I don't really know what I think about who wins this. I kind of want to lean Bautista because of the wrestling, but because Sandhagen is good at like defending wrestling, but not really like getting like reverting to where they were before. Like, he's good at stopping submissions and like stopping wrestlers from progressing because he's good at scrambling and stuff, but he's not good at like getting back to his feet and staying on his feet. We saw that in the Merab fight. It was like, okay, yeah, like you could defend a lot of the takedowns and Merab couldn't keep you on the ground for very long, but you never were able to put a halt to the takedowns altogether and just like down block him and stay on the feet. Like, that never happened. Merab was always able to close in and take him down. Yeah, he got up again, but you can only be defending for so long, right? You need to be able to stay on the feet in order to like get your offense going for Sandhagen. That could be a problem for him. I'm not really sure what the odds are. I don't even know if they're out yet. Brendan Royval versus Loney Kavanaugh, perfect matchmaking. I'm so glad they're throwing Loney Kavanaugh a top 5 fight because he looked so good against Brandon Moreno, and he's young. Dude, feed him into the top 3 as soon as possible because I think he's a future contender for the belt, especially considering that Tyra just fought for the belt, and I think Loney Kavanaugh is probably a better fighter than Tatsuro Tyra right now. Gable Steveson versus Elisha Ellison. I don't know anything about Elisha Ellison. I have not watched Gable Steveson that much. I watched his last fight a little bit where he like almost got head kicked by that random guy. So I'm a little skeptical about like how ready he is for the competition in the UFC, but the dude's an outstanding wrestler. I mean, he's like an absolutely incredible wrestler. So he's big too. So I'm sure he'll absolutely steamroll Elisha Ellison, but I'm telling you right now, Gable Steveson, he's like a Bo Nickel. Right? He's like a who's the other guy that we were saying you're waiting to bet against? Was it Otave Gautier? Something like
Probably.
that? Basically, Gable Stevenson's one of those guys that, mark my words, he's going to be a minus 1,000 favorite in every single fight until he gets fraud checked. Not fraud checked, but like till he has that fight where he fights somebody who's actually a decent MMA fighter and they expose his lack of experience. It's going to happen. He's probably going to fight a bunch of cans. He's probably going to absolutely steamroll Elisha Ellison. But eventually he's going to fight somebody and he's going to go from a minus 1,000 to his next fight being like a minus 150. That's what's going to happen. The odds are going to blow him way out of proportion until he fights somebody good. So just pay attention to the matchups. And I would not bet on Gable Steveson at all until we have more data.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, honestly, like I don't have to go in depth as well. I probably agree. I'd probably go Holloway. I think Paddy is really underrated. I think Bautista will take this one probably. I think he's developed his style a lot recently, especially his wrestling style.
He looks so good against Vinicius Oliveira.
I think when he was like in the UFC kind of in the beginning of his career, he was kind of like finding out what he wanted to be as a fighter. But I think recently he's really dug into the I'm a wrestler style, and it's worked out really well for him. And so I think he'll do that again. I think when he fought Corey the first time, he wasn't like where he is now in his style. I think he'll probably not steamroll through Corey, but I think it'll be a decision. He'll win. I'm taking Loney Kavanaugh. He's just so high level of striking. Taking Gable, and then we'll break down the rest when the fight happens, when the fights happen. So we'll probably end that there. And then next week there's no fights, and so we'll probably do something a little bit
different.
Yeah, something fun, maybe like a top 5 or I don't know what we'll do. But anyways, that'll be it for the pod.